10:15 in the morning. Over the Strait of Hormuz, an Iranian 14 Tomcat maintained a steady orbit at 22,000 feet. The mission was a standard combat air patrol, until a plain text message flickered across the pilot's primary flight display. The source of the signal was non-existent. The coordinates provided were precise. The warning itself was already too late to act on. The cockpit of the aging fighter was a cramped world of green cathode ray tubes and analog gauges. Major Abbas Rezaei adjusted his oxygen mask as he stared at the flickering text. It did not arrive via the encrypted radio link. It did not come from the ground controllers at Bandar Abbas. The message seemed to manifest directly within the mission computer of the aircraft. It read, 10:20, coordinates 26.3 north, 5.9 east, impact imminent. The coordinates pointed to a patch of empty water 30 miles to the south. It was a high-traffic lane for international shipping. Below the aircraft, the Strait of Hormuz was a shimmering sheet of blue glass. A dozen oil tankers moved like slow predators toward the open sea. The air was thick with heat haze, but the sky at 22,000 feet was a deep and empty void. Major Rezaei checked his radar. The screen showed the usual clutter of civilian transponders. To the west, a pair of American warships were visible as tiny white specks against the dark water. His radar warning receiver was silent. No one was locking onto him. No one was even looking at him. He keyed his radio to contact his wingman, flying 2 miles to his left. Rezaei spoke into the mask. Viper 2, this is Lead. Are you receiving text data on your primary display? The response was immediate and confused. Lead, this is Viper 2. Negative, my display is clear. Is there a system malfunction? Negative, Rezaei replied. Maintain formation. I am checking with ground control. He switched his frequency to the command center on the mainland. The controllers at Bandar Abbas were professional and calm. They confirmed that no data bursts had been sent to his aircraft. They reported no unusual activity in the sector. To the Iranian military, the morning was progressing exactly as planned. But on Rezaei's screen, the text remained. It was not a glitch. The letters did not flicker or fade. They were burned into the display with a clarity that the old hardware should not have been capable of producing. He looked at his clock. It was 10:17 in the morning. In 3 minutes, something was scheduled to happen at the coordinates on his screen. He looked down at the sea again. The USS Gravely, an American destroyer, was moving steadily toward the very coordinates mentioned in the message. The American ship was part of a carrier strike group operating in the Gulf of Oman. If an impact was imminent, the Americans were sailing directly into the path of it. Major Rezaei felt a cold trickle of sweat slide down his neck. The 14 was a relic of a different era, but its sensors were still formidable. He pushed the throttles forward. The twin engines roared as the Tomcat surged toward 30,000 feet. He needed a better vantage point. He needed to see what the message already knew. The flight computer began to chime. It was a low, rhythmic sound that Rezaei had never heard in 15 years of flying the Tomcat. It was not a missile alert. It was not a low fuel warning. It was a countdown. 9, 8, 7. The pilot gripped the control stick. His heart hammered against his ribs. He was a professional. He was trained for combat. But he was not trained for a machine that could predict the future in plain text. He looked at the empty sky ahead of him. There were no missiles in the air. There were no enemy fighters on his nose. There was only the heat, the blue water, and the ticking clock. The morning was still quiet. It would not stay that way. 10:22 in the morning. The Gulf of Oman. Inside the Combat Information Center of the USS Gravely, the air was cool and smelled of ozone and filtered oxygen. The blue glow of the Aegis Weapon System consoles illuminated the faces of 30 sailors. They were the eyes and ears of the destroyer. They were trained to see threats before they became reality. The radar operator leaned forward. His eyes narrowed as he watched a single yellow symbol on his glass display. Track 714. The Iranian Tomcat. He is breaking his orbit. He is climbing. Fast. The tactical action officer stood behind him. Confirm altitude. The operator adjusted his headset. Passing 28,000 feet. He is at military power. He is not squawking an emergency code. Sir, he is heading directly for the strait. In the dimly lit room, the tension shifted from routine to alert. The USS Gravely was a guided missile destroyer. Its job was to protect the sea lanes and the nearby aircraft carrier. An Iranian fighter behaving erratically was not just a curiosity, it was a potential threat. A few seconds later, the electronic warfare technician spoke up. Her voice was sharp. Captain, we have a wide-spectrum emission. It is not radar. It is not a standard radio transmission. The captain moved to the technician's station. Identify the source. The source is everywhere, sir, the technician replied. Her fingers flew across her keyboard. It is hitting every frequency. We monitor. It is even appearing on our internal secure networks. It is a plain text message. The captain looked at the secondary screen. The words were identical to the ones Major Rezaei saw in his cockpit miles away. Impact imminent. 10:20. Coordinates 2:6.3 north. 5:5.9 east. The tactical action officer checked his own display. Those coordinates are 30 miles ahead of us. They are on our projected course. Sir, that message is dated 2 minutes ago. The time of impact has already passed. The room went silent for a heartbeat. The Combat Information Center was designed to process thousands of data points per second. It was built to handle saturation attacks and stealth missiles. It was not designed to handle a warning that arrived after the event it predicted. Check the water at those coordinates, the captain ordered. Do we have any sonar contacts? Any surface vessels in the immediate vicinity? The sonar operator shook his head. The water is clear, sir. No torpedoes, no submarines. The nearest vessel is a civilian tanker 5 miles to the east. What about the aircraft? The captain asked. He is leveling off at 32,000 feet, the radar operator said. He is circling those exact coordinates. He is acting like he is looking for something, but there is nothing there. The captain stared at the text on the screen. It was impossible for an external signal to bypass the ship's firewalls and appear on a secure internal display. It suggested a level of cyber warfare capability that surpassed anything the foreign military possessed. It suggested something far more sophisticated. The electronic warfare technician spoke again. Her voice was lower now. Sir, the signal is changing. It is not a broadcast anymore. It is a pulse. It is synchronized with the fighter's radar. Is he locking onto us? The tactical action officer asked. His hand moved toward the weapons release cover. Negative, the technician said. He is not looking at us. He is looking at the water. And whatever he is seeing, he is terrified of it. On the radar screen, the yellow symbol representing the aircraft suddenly pitched down. The aircraft was no longer circling. It was diving. It was a high-speed, aggressive descent toward the empty patch of ocean. The captain keyed the ship's internal intercom. Set condition 2 throughout the ship. All stations to high alert. This is not a drill. Across the Strait of Hormuz, the balance of power was beginning to tilt. Both sides were watching the same empty point on the map. And both sides were realizing that the silence of the morning was a lie. 10:30 in the morning. Bandar Abbas Air Base, Iran. The underground command center was a hive of controlled chaos. General Musavi stared at the massive tactical map projected onto the far wall. His technicians were frantically running diagnostics on the secure communication lines. They had found nothing. No breach, no rogue signals. Yet, the reports from Major Rezaei were undeniable. The general turned to his communications officer. You are certain we did not transmit that text? Confirmed, General, the officer replied. The encryption keys are intact. The signal did not originate from any of our ground stations. It did not come from our satellites. It appeared only on the pilot's display. Musavi looked back at the map. The American carrier strike group was moving. He could see the icons for 2 American fighters climbing away from the carrier. The Americans are launching. They think we are coordinating an attack. Tell Rezaei to stabilize his flight path. He must not provoke them. He is not responding to the order, sir, the officer said. He is still diving toward the coordinates. He says his radar is intermittent. He claims he is seeing something the ground sensors cannot detect. 10:33 in the morning, the Gulf of Oman. 2 F-18 Super Hornets cleared the catapults of the USS Abraham Lincoln in quick succession. The roar of their engines was a physical force that shook the flight deck. The pilots, call signs Guardian 1 and Guardian 2, were already switching their systems to combat mode. The air controller's voice was steady in their headsets. Guardian 1. This is Control. Vector 270. Intercept the Iranian Tomcat. He is descending rapidly into the shipping lane. Altitude 5,000 feet and dropping. The lead pilot, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Jenkins, banked her fighter. To the west. Copy. Control. Guardian 1 has the contact. He is moving fast. We are at military power. Guardian 1. Be advised, the controller continued. The USS Gravely reports a wide-spectrum signal interference. Your systems may be affected. Do not engage unless the rules of engagement are met. Confirm. Confirm. Control, Jenkins said. She checked her radar. The Iranian 14 was a bright green blip on her screen. It was behaving like an aircraft in a dogfight, but there was no opponent. He is twisting and turning. It looks like he is trying to get a lock on empty air. 10:35 in the morning. The Strait of Hormuz. Major Rezaei pulled the control stick back with both hands. The 14 leveled off at 3,000 feet. The G-force pressed him deep into his seat. His breathing was heavy and ragged. To his left, his wingman stayed in a tight formation, his voice frantic over the radio. Lead. What are you doing? There is nothing there. Break off. Rezaei did not answer. He was staring at his radar screen. The impossible text was gone, replaced by a single, pulsing contact. It was directly in front of him. It had no transponder. It had no heat signature. It was a perfect, cold circle on his display. I have a track, Rezaei whispered. Viper. 2. Do you see it? Target is at 12 o'clock. Range 5 miles. Negative. Lead, the wingman replied. My radar is clear. The sky is empty. Rezaei looked out through the canopy. The morning sun was blinding. The water below was a deep, unforgiving blue. He blinked, trying to clear his vision. Then, he saw it. It was a shimmer, not a plane, not a drone. It looked like a distortion in the air, like heat rising from a desert road, but it was shaped like a spear. It was moving toward the USS Gravely at a speed that defied physics. Guardian 1. This is Viper lead, Rezaei shouted into his radio, switching to the international distress frequency. The American ship. You must tell them to turn. It is not a missile. It is already under them. In the cockpit of her Super Hornet, Sarah Jenkins heard the Iranian pilot's voice. It was not the voice of a provocateur. It was the voice of a man who had seen a ghost. 10:38 in the morning. The voice of the Iranian pilot crackled in Sarah Jenkins' headset with a chilling intensity. It was the international distress frequency. It was supposed to be for emergencies, for sinking ships, for downed pilots. It was not for tactical warnings between adversaries. Viper led. This is Guardian 1, Sarah responded. Her voice remained professional and flat. I do not have a visual on your contact. State the nature of the threat. Is it a mechanical failure? Negative. This is not a failure, Rezaei replied. His voice was strained under the pressure of a high-gravity turn. It is a physical anomaly. It is moving toward your destroyer. My radar has a firm lock. Why can you not see it? Inside the Combat Information Center of the USS Gravely, the captain stood behind the sonar station. Talk to me. Does that Tomcat have a lock on us? Negative, sir, the operator replied. His fire control radar is active, but it is pointed 5 degrees offset from our position. He is locking onto a point in space 1,000 feet above the water. But there is nothing there, the captain said. Sir, the Iranian is maneuvering like he is in a dogfight, the tactical action officer added. He just pulled a 7G brake. If he was aiming for us, he would be flying a much more stable profile. 10:40 in the morning. High above the water, Major Rezaei felt the 14 shudder. He was pushing the airframe to its absolute limit. The spear-shaped shimmer was still there. It was not a craft. It had no wings. It moved with a fluid, terrifying grace that made the advanced fighter feel like a clumsy bird. Suddenly, the plain text message flashed onto his display again. It did not just warn him, it gave him an instruction. Hard left, 30 degrees. Now, Rezaei did not think. He did not check his instruments. He slammed the control stick to the left. The Tomcat rolled violently. A split second later, a ripple of distorted air screamed past his cockpit. It was so close that the atmospheric pressure rocked the 30-ton jet as if it were a toy. The Iranian pilot gasped. The warning had arrived exactly 2 seconds before the ripple passed through his previous position. It was not tracking the aircraft. It was tracking his intent. It knew where he was going to be before he made the decision to move.
How did it do that?
He almost hit something, Sarah Jenkins whispered into her mask. She had seen the 14 jerk in midair. It was a maneuver that should have been impossible for a pilot who was not under attack. Control. Guardian 1. The contact just performed an emergency evasive maneuver. I still have no visual on an aggressor. Guardian 1. This is Control, the carrier responded. The Admiral is monitoring. Be advised, the Iranian wingman is now arming his weapons. He believes his lead is under fire. 10:42 in the morning. The situation was spiraling out of control. On the radar screens of every ship in the carrier strike group, the second Iranian 14 had switched its radar to combat mode. To the automated systems of the United States Navy, this was a clear act of aggression. Inside the flag bridge of the USS Abraham Lincoln, the Admiral watched the digital display. The rules of engagement are clear. If they lock on to our pilots, we have the right to defend. But something is wrong here. Sir, the Gravely is reporting more text interference, an aide said. It is appearing on the Aegis consoles now. The Admiral looked at the screen. The text was no longer a warning. It was a command. Observation is necessary. Engagement is futile. Who is sending this? The Admiral asked. Is it the Iranians? Is it a cyber attack from the mainland? Sir, the signal source is coming from the center of the strait, the aide replied. From the empty water. The Admiral leaned forward. Guardian 1. This is the Admiral. Do not fire. I repeat, do not fire. Even if you are locked. Both sides are being manipulated. Stay on your current vector. The tension was a physical weight. 4 high-performance fighters were now circling a single point in the ocean. 2 nations were seconds away from a war that neither had planned. And in the center of it all, the shimmer waited. The morning was no longer quiet. The sound of jet engines filled the sky like a scream. 10:45 in the morning. The Strait of Hormuz. The airspace was now a tangled web of radar beams and high-frequency noise. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Jenkins felt the vibration of her Super Hornet as it cut through the thick air at 500 knots. Her cockpit was a chorus of electronic warnings. The Iranian wingman, Viper 2, had a solid radar lock on her wingman, Guardian 2. Under the standard rules of engagement, she should have already fired her missiles. Sarah Jenkins spoke into the radio. Control. Guardian 1. I have a hostile radar lock on my wingman. Requesting permission to engage. The response from the carrier was immediate. Guardian 1. This is the Admiral. Permission denied. Hold your position. We are seeing the same interference on our end. Do not fire. Sir. He is arming his missiles. Sarah replied. Her hand tightened on the flight stick. If he fires, we cannot defend at this range. 10:47 in the morning. Inside the second 14, Captain Salami was gripped by a cold adrenaline. He saw his flight leader, Major Rezaei, flying in erratic circles. He saw the American fighters closing in. To Salami, this was not a mystery. It was an ambush. He flipped the safety cover on his missile release button. His finger hovered over the trigger. Major Rezaei's voice screamed over the internal channel. "Salami, stand down. Do not lock the Americans. You are looking at the wrong target. They are going to kill you." "Lead," Salami responded. His voice was thick with panic. "I have a lock. I am taking the shot." "Negative. Negative," Rezaei shouted. "Look at the water. Look at the coordinates." 10:48 in the morning. At the National Military Command Center in Tehran and the Pentagon in Washington, the screens showed 4 aircraft in a death spiral. Both nations had moved to their highest state of military alert. In the Persian Gulf, every ship in the American strike group had its weapon systems active. On the Iranian coast, surface-to-air missile batteries were tracking the American jets. A single finger twitch by a 24-year-old pilot would start a war that would burn the entire region. The water at coordinates 6.3 north began to boil. It was not caused by heat. It was a massive cavitation effect. A silent displacement of energy was occurring beneath the surface. The shimmer that Major Rezaei had been chasing was no longer a ghost. It was becoming a solid pillar of distorted light. It rose 300 feet into the air. It was silent. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. 10:49 in the morning. The USS Gravely was now only 2 miles from the boiling water. The ship's sensors were useless. The Aegis radar was blinded by a wall of white noise. The captain stood on the bridge wing, looking through binoculars. The captain spoke to his executive officer. "Tell the fighters to break off. Whatever that is, it is not Iranian. It is not ours." The executive officer looked at the tactical display. "Sir, the Iranian wingman is firing. He just launched." A single fire-and-forget missile drifted off the rail of the second Iranian 14. It was not aimed at the Americans. It was aimed at the pillar of light. Captain Salami had broken. He had chosen to fire at the unknown. Sarah Jenkins watched the smoke trail from her cockpit. Missile away. Viper 2 has engaged the anomaly. Major Rezaei watched the missile streak toward the shimmer. No, no, no. The missile reached the edge of the distorted light. It did not explode. It did not impact. It simply stopped. The weapon hung in midair, frozen in time and space, 300 feet above the water. Then, the plain text message returned to every screen in the theater. It was no longer a warning. It was a sentence. The morning was over. The crisis had reached its peak. 10:50 in the morning. The missile hung in the air like an exhibit in a museum. Its solid fuel motor continued to burn. A bright orange flame pushed against nothing. It did not move an inch. It was a violation of every law of motion. In the cockpit of Guardian 1, Sarah Jenkins felt her flight controls go limp. The joystick moved without resistance. The digital displays flickered once, twice, and then went dark. The roar of her twin engines vanished. Silence rushed into the cockpit. It was the sound of a 30-ton aircraft becoming a glider. "Control, I have total power loss," Sarah said. Her voice was a whisper. There was no one to hear her. The radio was dead. Inside the Combat Information Center of the USS Gravely, every screen turned a brilliant, blinding white. The cooling fans stopped. The hum of the ship's electrical heart died. 300 sailors were suddenly in the dark, lit only by the emergency red lanterns. The captain gripped the edge of the tactical table. "Status: dead, sir," the tactical action officer replied. "Everything is dead. We are drifting." 10:50 and 30 seconds in the morning. Major Rezaei watched as his wingman's 14 drifted away. Salami was gesturing wildly behind his canopy. His aircraft was banking slowly to the right, unresponsive to his inputs. Rezaei looked at his own hands. They were shaking. The pillar of light was no longer shimmering. It was solidifying. The distorted air began to pull inward. The water below was no longer boiling. It was perfectly flat. It was a circle of glass in a restless sea. Rezaei looked at his display. The plain text returned. One final line. "We are not the enemy." 10:51 in the morning. The sky changed color. The deep blue of the morning shifted to a bruised, metallic violet. The sun was still there, but its light was filtered through an invisible lens. The frozen missile suddenly turned. It did not fall. It rotated 180 degrees until it was pointed directly back at the aircraft that had fired it. The orange flame of its motor intensified. The air around the missile began to glow. Sarah Jenkins watched from her dead cockpit. She saw the Iranian fighter trapped in the path of its own weapon. She saw the American destroyer sitting motionless in the water. She saw the world shifting on its axis in a small patch of the Middle East. The violet sky began to pulse. A low-frequency hum vibrated through the airframes of the jets. It was a sound felt in the teeth, a sound felt in the bone. The radar warning receivers on every ship and plane suddenly screamed once. One final, high-pitched note. 10:51 in the morning. The violet sky did not fade. It deepened. The missile pointed at Captain Salami did not accelerate. It began to fray at the edges. The solid metal of its casing turned into a fine, glowing dust. The orange flame of the motor became a stream of white light. Within seconds, the weapon had simply vanished. It was not destroyed. It was disassembled. Inside his cockpit, Major Rezaei watched the particles of his wingman's missile drift toward the central pillar. The hum in his teeth grew louder. It was a melody now. It was mathematical. He looked at his hands. They were translucent. For a brief, terrifying moment, he could see the wiring of the control stick through his own palms. Viper 2. Do you see this? Rezaei tried to speak. There was no sound in the cockpit. The air itself seemed to have lost the ability to carry vibrations. He was shouting into a vacuum. 10:51 and 30 seconds in the morning. 2 miles away, Sarah Jenkins felt a sudden, sharp clarity. The darkness of her dead cockpit was gone. She was no longer looking through a canopy. The glass, the frame, and the instrument panel had become invisible. She was suspended 30,000 feet in the air. Below her, the USS Gravely sat like a toy in a basin of frozen glass. She looked toward the Iranian fighters. She could see Major Rezaei. She could see the sweat on his forehead. She could see the fear in his eyes. More than that, she could feel it. A bridge had been built. It was a connection that bypassed language and radio waves. It was a direct link between two adversaries who were now united by a single, overwhelming fact. They were irrelevant. The pillar of light pulsed one final time. The water at the coordinates began to rise. It did not splash. It did not spray. A perfect cylinder of seawater, 500 feet in diameter, lifted into the air. It rose past the height of the destroyer. It rose past the flight paths of the jets. Inside the water, thousands of fish were visible, suspended in the blue column like insects in amber. A voice spoke. It did not come from the radio. It did not come from the plain text displays. It resonated within the physical structure of every ship and aircraft in the strait. The coordinates were exact. The warning was given. You chose to fire. The voice was not human. It carried the weight of a machine, but the inflection of a teacher. The error is acknowledged. The correction is beginning. Inside the Combat Information Center of the USS Gravely, the captain watched as the red emergency lights turned gold. The walls of the ship seemed to vibrate with the frequency of a tuning fork. The sailors stood frozen. They were not paralyzed by force. They were paralyzed by awe. The pillar of light suddenly expanded. It did not explode. It simply grew until it swallowed the cylinder of water. It swallowed the empty air. It swallowed the Iranian Tomcat and the American Super Hornet. For one heartbeat, there was no Strait of Hormuz. There was no territorial dispute. There was no history of conflict. There was only a blinding, silent whiteness that stretched from the seabed to the edge of space. 10:52 in the morning. The whiteness snapped shut. Major Rezaei slammed forward into his straps. The roar of his engines returned with a deafening blast. His cockpit displays screamed to life. Every alarm in the aircraft went off simultaneously. The sky was blue again. The sun was hot. He gripped the stick. The 14 was falling. He shoved the throttles to the wall and pulled back. The jet groaned as it caught the air at 5,000 feet. Viper 2. Status. Rezaei gasped. I am here. Lead. Salami's voice cracked over the radio. He sounded like he was crying. The missile. It is gone. Everything is back. Sarah Jenkins leveled her Super Hornet at 20,000 feet. Her radar was sweeping. Her systems were green. She looked at her tactical display. The USS Gravely was back on its course, but the water at coordinates 26.3 north was different. There was no pillar. There was no boiling. There was only a hole. A perfect, circular void in the ocean where the water refused to flow. It was a wound in the sea that should not have existed. The morning was quiet again, but the silence was heavy. 10:55 in the morning. The hole in the ocean remained. It was a perfect, dark circle, 300 feet across, where the sea simply ended. The water did not pour into the void. It stood like a vertical wall of glass, defying gravity. Around the edges of the hole, the current was calm. There was no whirlpool. There was no sound of rushing water. Inside the cockpit of Guardian 1, Sarah Jenkins circled the perimeter of the anomaly. Her sensors were recording everything, but the data was nonsensical. Her infrared camera showed the hole as a zone of absolute zero. Her radar pulses did not bounce back. They were simply swallowed by the blackness. "Control. Guardian 1," Sarah said. Her voice was steady, but her hand was white-knuckled on the stick. "I am orbiting the contact site. The physical anomaly persists. It is a hole in the water. I repeat, the sea is not filling the space." Requesting instructions. The silence from the carrier lasted 10 seconds. When the Admiral spoke, his voice was tight. "Guardian 1, maintain a 5-mile standoff. Do not approach the perimeter. We have every available sensor on that coordinate. The Iranians are doing the same." Sarah looked across the void. 2 miles away, Major Rezaei's 14 was a dark silhouette against the sun. The two jets, once hunters and prey, were now like two children standing on the edge of a well. 11 o'clock in the morning. On the bridge of the USS Gravely, the captain stared at the live feed from a drone hovering directly over the hole. The water walls were perfectly smooth. At the bottom of the void, 300 feet down, the seabed was visible. It was dry. The silt and sand were undisturbed, as if the water had never been there at all. "The Iranians are hailing us," the communications officer said. "Open channel. Plain text." The captain didn't look away from the screen. "Put it through." The voice of General Musavi from Bandar Abbas filled the bridge. It was stripped of its usual revolutionary bravado. "USS Gravely. This is Iranian command. Our sensors indicate a gravitational distortion at the coordinates. We are observing a complete cessation of naval activity in the sector. Do you intend to occupy the zone?" The captain picked up the handset. "General, this is the captain of the Gravely. We have no intention of occupying a hole in the ocean. We are as blind as you are. Our systems are recovering, but the data is inconsistent." "Do you have a visual on the source?" "Negative," Musavi replied. "The signal we both received the warning. It has ceased. But my pilots report a sense of presence. They are unwilling to disengage until the water returns." The captain looked at the tactical action officer. "He's right. No one wants to turn their back on this." Inside the hole, something began to change. The dry seabed at the bottom started to glow, with a soft, pulsing rhythm. It was the same violet light that had filled the sky minutes before. From the center of the dry sand, a small metallic object began to emerge. It was a sphere, no larger than a basketball, polished to a mirror finish. The sphere did not fly. It ascended through the center of the void at a constant, measured pace. As it rose, the water walls began to tremble. The correction was moving into its second phase. In the air, Sarah Jenkins watched the sphere break the surface of the imaginary waterline. It didn't stop. It continued to rise until it was level with her cockpit. It hung there, motionless, reflecting the blue sky and the gray jets in its perfect surface. Then, the radios on every frequency crackled to life, with a single, synchronized pulse of static. It wasn't a message this time, it was a coordinates shift. The sphere wasn't looking at the Strait of Hormuz anymore. It was looking at the stars. The morning was slipping away. The tactical standoff had become a scientific crisis, and the two nations involved were realizing that the Strait of Hormuz was no longer the most important place on Earth. 11:05 in the morning. The metallic sphere hung in the air, a silent sentinel between the American and Iranian aircraft. It did not emit heat. It did not reflect radar. It simply existed as a perfect mathematical point in the sky. Below it, the hole in the ocean began to fail. The invisible walls of the void started to ripple like a curtain in the wind. Inside his cockpit, Major Rezaei watched the sphere. He was within a mile of the object. His instruments were stable now, but they refused to acknowledge the sphere's presence. To the 14's radar, the sky ahead was empty. To the pilot's eyes, it was the only thing that mattered. Lead. The water. Salami's voice came over the radio. The hole is closing. It was not a sudden collapse. The seawater did not rush in with a roar. Instead, the ocean seemed to remember where it was supposed to be. The vertical walls of glass dissolved back into liquid, pouring inward with a soft, rhythmic thrumming sound. Within minutes, the white foam settled. The dry seabed was covered once more by the deep blue of the strait. The physical scar on the ocean was gone, but the sphere remained. 11:10 in the morning. On the USS Abraham Lincoln, the admiral stood in the flag bridge, surrounded by his senior staff. The live feed from the Gravely was displayed on the central monitor. What is its altitude? Stable at 20,000 feet. Sir, the tactical officer replied. It is maintaining a fixed position relative to the Earth's surface. It is not drifting with the wind. And the Iranians? The admiral asked. They are holding their distance. Major Rezaei is still in the lead. They have transitioned to a non-aggressive posture. Sir, they are waiting for us to make the first move. The admiral looked at the sphere. It was a mirror of the world around it. He could see the reflection of the carrier on its surface, even from miles away. We are not making a move. This is no longer a tactical engagement. This is a first contact event. 11:15 in the morning. The sphere suddenly pulsed. The violet light returned, but only for a fraction of a second. A high-frequency tone vibrated through the air, shifting in pitch until it reached a frequency that humans could not hear, but that the aircraft sensors could record. On Sarah Jenkins' display, the plain text returned one final time. The letters were no longer green. They were a deep, glowing violet. The baseline is established. The reaction is recorded. Do not seek the source. The source will return when the coordinates align. The sphere began to accelerate. It did not use engines. It did not create a sonic boom. It simply moved upward, a silver streak that vanished into the thin air of the upper atmosphere in less than a second. Sarah Jenkins followed the streak with her eyes until it was nothing more than a star in the daylight. Control. Guardian 1. The contact has departed. Vertical climb at an unmeasurable velocity. The sky is clear. The Iranian fighters did not pursue. Major Rezaei watched the silver point vanish. He felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of exhaustion. The adrenaline that had sustained him for the last hour was gone, replaced by a hollow realization. He looked at his fuel gauge. He was low. Viper 2. This is lead, Rezaei said. His voice was tired. The event is concluded. Return to base. Maintain formation. Copy. Lead, Salami replied. The two Iranian fighters turned north, toward the coast of Iran. A few miles away, the two American Super Hornets turned south, toward the carrier. For the first time in decades, the two sides did not paint each other with fire control radar as they departed. They did not maneuver for advantage. They flew home in a heavy, shared silence. The conflict that had almost consumed the morning felt small. The strategic importance of the strait felt temporary. Both nations had been shown the same truth. They were playing for stakes that did not matter, in a universe that was much larger than the water between them. 3 days later, the Pentagon and the Iranian Ministry of Defense. The crisis had passed into the hands of the analysts, the scientists, and the intelligence officers. The frantic energy of the cockpit and the Combat Information Center had been replaced by the sterile hum of conference rooms and the slow progress of forensic data recovery. In Washington, a classified brief was being presented to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. In Tehran, General Mousavi sat before a committee of high-ranking officials. Both rooms were looking at the same images. The primary focus was the plain text signal. Technicians from both nations had arrived at the same impossible conclusion. The message did not come from an external transmitter. It had not been broadcast over the airwaves. Instead, the signal had been induced directly into the hardware of the mission computers. It was as if the electrical currents within the machines had been manipulated to form the letters and numbers. It was a level of control over matter that made modern cyber warfare look like a child's toy. The second focus was the hole in the ocean. Oceanographic sensors on the USS Gravely had recorded the displacement of over 5 million gallons of seawater. The data showed that the water had not been pushed aside by pressure. It had been temporarily removed from the three-dimensional map of the area. When the correction was finished, the water was returned with a precision that left the local ecosystem undisturbed. There were no dead fish. There was no chemical residue. There was only the memory of the void. Military analysis of the encounter was even more sobering. The two American Super Hornets and the two Iranian Tomcats had been subjected to a total system shutdown that bypassed every failsafe and emergency backup. For 60 seconds, the most advanced weapons platforms in the region were effectively deleted from the tactical grid. Both nations had spent billions of dollars on stealth, electronic hardening, and redundant systems. None of it had mattered. The political fallout was strangely muted. Neither Washington nor Tehran issued a public statement. There were no accusations of aggression. There were no threats of retaliation. For the first time in the history of the Strait of Hormuz, both sides were united by a shared sense of humility. They had been treated like children playing with matches in a room filled with gasoline. The warning was not an act of hostility. It was an act of preservation. Strategic assessments concluded that the source of the anomaly was not terrestrial. No nation on Earth possessed the capability to manipulate gravity, disassemble matter at the atomic level, or predict human intent with such terrifying accuracy. The warning had arrived at 10:15 in the morning for an event that took place at 10:20. The coordinates were provided before the American ship or the Iranian jets had even reached the sector. The final report in both capitals reached a similar, unsettling conclusion. The event in the Strait of Hormuz was not a random occurrence. It was a baseline test. The unknown intelligence had monitored the reaction of the two most volatile military forces in the region. It had watched as they moved toward conflict, and it had intervened only when a weapon was fired. The correction was a message. Whatever is watching the Strait of Hormuz is not interested in the territorial claims of men. It is not interested in the flow of oil or the balance of power. It is interested in the baseline of human behavior. And as the reports were filed into the deepest vaults of secret intelligence, one question remained for the analysts. The warning was called too late by the system that received it. But as the world's militaries looked back at the data, they realized the warning wasn't for the event that had happened. It was for the event that was still to come. The coordinates for the next alignment were already appearing on deep space sensors, thousands of miles above the planet. The morning of the Strait was just the beginning. The sky was no longer a vacuum, it was a classroom, and the next lesson was already scheduled.